There's a lot of people who still don't think we're in World War III. And even the media talks about it like it could happen. So I just figured I would list just about every country involved in a conflict right now, just to give you an idea of how many countries are actually in a state of war. And that might make you change your opinion based on how much armed conflict is actually happening right now. And of course, I do want to mention that Midway USA is the biggest supporter of the channel, and thanks to them, I can give you information like this, and then if you feel the need to prepare for said World War III situation, you can check them out because they have a lot to offer. Now, these countries are all participating in armed conflict right now, and that should tell you kind of where we're at, right? So, of course, we have our major superpowers, the United States of America, China, and Russia, and all three of them are currently involved in armed conflict. So let's just start with that. Now, they have nuclear weapons, they're major superpowers, everything they do affects anything else that happens on the planet. That's happening. Okay, let's talk about other countries because, that doesn't really shape the entire picture. So let's just paint something Bob Ross style a little bit better for you, okay? How about the Middle East? Well, we've got Israel, Iran, Iraq. We have Palestine, which isn't technically a country, but it's considered a non-member observer state according to the UN. But Palestine, we have Lebanon, Yemen, Egypt, Turkey, Syria, and Libya. And there's more going on, but those countries are all relatively major players and involved in armed conflict of some kind right this second. That's not insignificant now, is it? Okay, well, what about Asia? Well, in Asia, we also have Afghanistan, India, Myanmar, Pakistan, and you can even consider the Philippines because, they have quite a bit going on when it comes to certain conflicts in their region. But all those countries are currently in a state of armed conflict. And then we also have to mention the tensions escalating between North Korea and South Korea and Japan. And of course, those are nuclear tensions. So all of that's happening. And let's not forget Taiwan, which is, having their own issues with China. And of course, they're not necessarily involved directly with armed conflict right now, but they are conducting many military drills and having their civilian population hide in bunkers as well as parking garages as part of air raid drills. So, anyway, let's move on to Europe. What's going on in Europe? Well, there's Ukraine, which, if you haven't figured out yet, pretty much involves the entire EU. Like every country in Europe is involved in that in one way or another. But let's just talk about it separately. Ukraine, okay. Then we also have, Moldova, Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan, which, those are all kind of like Eurasian countries, but they're all involved in armed conflict right now. And of course, Ukraine is huge when it comes to that, and Ukraine involves everyone else. So, that's Europe, which, like I said, is all of Europe because of what's happening with Ukraine. But also, what about Africa? We're just going to say the entire continent. Africa is just in a perpetual state of war. So, yes, every single country right there involved in armed conflict? Not necessarily, but pretty much all of them. So we're just going to say Africa, yes. All right. What about Latin America? Well, you've got destabilization occurring there, and their version of armed conflict is more criminal in behavior, especially related to the drug cartels and everything else. But we have Mexico, Colombia, Ecuador, and we also have the Venezuela-Guyana situation, which is still escalating, not getting as much media coverage because there hasn't been any show of force quite yet, but things are moving forward there. So yeah, Latin America, not in the greatest shape either. And of course, Mexico being, our neighbor to the south, having that large of an issue that it's considered an armed conflict should tell you something. But they also have their hands in just about anything else that occurs in Latin America, including what's going on in Colombia and Ecuador. So, well, that doesn't necessarily sound like World War, Magic Prepper. I mean, that's just like a large amount of countries that are all involved in armed conflict of some kind, including the three major superpowers. But what do you mean? Like, what about countries like, you didn't specifically say like Australia or like New Zealand or, I mean, we know the UK is involved with Ukraine, but like, are they actually directly involved in armed conflict? Well, you know, we know Germany is definitely involved with Ukraine in armed conflict, especially, providing tanks and everything else, and having weird interactions directly with Russia at times. But let's just go ahead and set that aside. Here's just a small example for you, okay? A small example. Now, I also want to say, if you are trying to stabilize yourself throughout this process of World War III, and you want to come out on the other side without, I don't know, just having nothing to show for it, check out magicpeppergold.com, where Genesis Gold Group can possibly help you stabilize some of your wealth through precious metal assets, because that might be important at some point in time. I don't know how much gold will be worth post-nuclear war, but I do know it'll probably be worth more than a lot of other things. So just keep that in mind. That's not me giving you financial advice. That's just me talking to myself. MagicPepperGold.com, they support the channel, and hopefully you can support yourself with it too. I will get lead and brass, you will get gold and silver, and we'll both be happy. So, here's an example as to how countries like Australia, New Zealand, the UK, and some other countries are directly involved in armed conflict right now too, okay? It was just recently said that 10 countries were involved with the airstrikes being taken out on Yemen right now. Okay, well, who's involved? Well, I can tell you. Australia, Bahrain, Canada, Denmark, Germany, the Netherlands, New Zealand, South Korea, the UK, and the United States of America. So all 10 of those countries are involved with bombing one country in the Middle East, and the Middle East as a whole is basically at war, and we also have everything going on in Europe. We have the three major superpowers all involved with armed conflicts right this second. Latin America is falling apart, especially in the midst of a criminally funded drug war. And we also have Asia, where you have nuclear tests being done underwater by North Korea. We have Japan constantly taking cover from their missiles flying overhead. South Korea is training with the United States on a regular basis. China is always poking the bear and has their hands in just about everything. Africa as an entire continent is basically in a state of war, where China is funding a lot of it. And we also have everything else going on regarding the Middle East, because we can't forget about the Middle East, because the Middle East is, in fact, the Middle East. So, I don't know. Are we in World War III? I mean, is the entire world at war? Is the US, Russia, and China involved in just about every separate armed conflict happening around the planet right now? At least one of them is, with every single conflict. So what does that sound like to you? I don't know. Let me know down in the comments below. Like, are we in World War III? Does that demonstrate anything to anybody? Or are we still just waiting on the media to be like, oh, by the way, it's World War III finally, we're there. I don't know if that's actually going to happen. Do you? So, just thought I'd share that. Anything else you need from me at all, go to magicpepper.com. And besides that, it's going to be it for Magic Prepper.